Have you ever felt like you were living someone else's life? Like your dreams, your desires, your very happiness were put on hold for the sake of others? Well, that was exactly how Jessica felt. A woman who worked tirelessly, saved every penny, and built a life for herself, all while her family only saw her as the one who could hold it all together. But what happens when you finally decide to choose yourself over the needs of others? What if the moment you do, everything you've built, the life you've worked so hard for, comes crashing down around you? This is the story of Jessica, someone who, after years of being the perfect daughter, the one who always sacrificed for her family, finally makes a choice. A choice to stop living for everyone else and start living for herself. It's not easy, it's not simple, and it certainly doesn't come without consequences. But what Jessica discovers is something so powerful it changes the course of her life forever. And when she finally chooses herself, she doesn't just change her future. She shows the people around her that real strength doesn't come from giving in, but from standing firm and deciding for once that her happiness matters too. Jessica had always been the quiet one in the family, the steady, reliable one who kept everything in order while her older sister, Vanessa, grabbed all the attention. From the moment she could remember, it was always Vanessa who got the fancy birthday parties, the new clothes, the praise. And it was always Jessica, tucked in the background, keeping her head down and doing what she was supposed to. The subtle favoritism, the unspoken expectations, had always weighed heavily on Jessica, yet she never complained. After all, wasn't she the one who could handle it all? She worked hard, lived frugally, and dreamed of one thing: a small, peaceful home where she could finally find some quiet, where she could relax and enjoy life without constantly worrying about someone else's problems. She'd saved for years, slowly but steadily, so she could buy that house, her dream. But when the day finally arrived, when Jessica was ready to take that step, something unexpected happened. Her family, without even asking her, assumed that her dream house would be for them too. They had their own plans for her life, and it wasn't part of her dream. And in that moment, Jessica realized something she had been ignoring for years. The people she loved, the ones she had always put first, had never asked what she wanted. They had simply expected her to be their safety net, their solution. The moment Jessica stood up for herself, for the first time in her life, everything changed. What followed was a journey of growth, of boundaries, of choosing herself, even when it felt like she was tearing her family apart. But in doing so, Jessica discovered the most important lesson of all. The greatest act of love you can give yourself is the freedom to choose your own happiness. Now let's dive into Jessica's story. A story that's not just about buying a house, but about finding the courage to create a life that truly belongs to you. Jessica is 31 years old, a financial advisor in Seattle, and someone who's always been known as the stable one in her family. She lives a life that some might call modest, even extreme in its simplicity. While others around her are caught up in the whirlwind of consumerism, she keeps her life in order with spreadsheets, budgeting, and a clear sense of financial independence. But what really sets Jessica apart is how much she's sacrificed to build this life. She's the kind of person who doesn't splurge on luxuries, who forgoes extravagant vacations and shiny new things. Instead, she invests in her future, each penny carefully saved to one day reach her dream of owning a small, peaceful home. This dream has been her quiet obsession for years. She's worked tirelessly. No credit card debt, no impulse buys, and certainly no fancy dinners unless it's with her close circle of friends. She didn't need much, just the basics and the freedom to choose her future. Jessica's story begins long before she started saving for a house. It began in her childhood, where the differences between her and her older sister Vanessa were clear from the start. Jessica loved her sister, but from the moment they were old enough to notice, she could feel the subtle but undeniable favoritism. Vanessa, with her golden hair and magnetic personality, was the star of the family. She received all the attention, whether it was from their parents, relatives, or even friends. Her birthday parties were big events, with streamers, balloons, and extravagant gifts. Meanwhile, Jessica's celebrations were quieter, less noticed, often tucked away with simple family dinners and quick toasts. It wasn't that Jessica was overlooked on purpose. It was just that Vanessa always seemed to steal the spotlight. Many of us have experienced or witnessed the quiet sting of favoritism within a family. Maybe one child gets more praise for their achievements, while the other is quietly pushed to the side. Or perhaps one sibling's needs are always prioritized, creating an unspoken understanding that they are the favorite. This kind of dynamic can make someone feel invisible, as though their achievements or desires are not as important as those of their sibling. Jessica, however, never voiced her disappointment. She was the good daughter, the one who always did what was expected of her, quietly falling into the role of the responsible, dependable one. But being the responsible one came at a cost. It meant that Jessica had to keep her feelings to herself, bury her wants, and make sure that everyone else was taken care of first. For as long as Jessica could remember, she had dreamed of one thing: a place of her own. A small house with a garden, nestled somewhere quiet, where the hustle and bustle of city life couldn't touch her. A place where she could wake up to birdsong, sip her tea in the morning sunlight, and finally breathe without the weight of her family's expectations pressing down on her. This dream wasn't just about owning property. It was about freedom to live on her own terms. But while she worked tirelessly to achieve this dream, Jessica never really shared it with anyone. It wasn't that she didn't want to. It's just that, over the years, she had learned that her dreams didn't matter much compared to the needs of others. And so, she kept it to herself, silently saving every penny and making sacrifices along the way. No new clothes, no expensive dinners, no vacations. She lived modestly, always putting away a little more each month toward her down payment, knowing that the day would come when she could finally move into that quiet home of her own. This is something many of us can relate to. Whether it's a dream of a house, a career, or simply a life without constant stress, we often keep our ambitions quiet. We live frugally, save where we can, and put off our desires in favor of responsibilities. For some, it's a dream of financial independence like Jessica, while for others, it may be the pursuit of something more personal. The dream of freedom, of living life on our own terms, is universal. But how many of us actually take the steps to turn that dream into a reality? Jessica's journey reflects that quiet dedication to a goal. She wasn't the type to seek validation from others. She didn't need praise or recognition. She just wanted to make it happen. And so she did. She spent 7 years building her savings, sticking to her routine, and saying no to things that didn't align with her dream. Jessica had been planning her dream home for years. She'd carefully picked out the house she wanted, a modest 2-bedroom cottage surrounded by nature, where the sound of birds could be heard every morning. She had saved enough for the down payment, set aside money for fees, and had even calculated how much she could comfortably afford without sacrificing her lifestyle. This was the moment she had been working toward, the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. She was finally ready to take the leap and make this dream her reality. One evening, at a family dinner, Jessica decided it was time to share her news. The air was light, with the usual chatter about the kids, work, and life in general. She had just received the news that she'd been approved for the loan, and she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she scrolled through the listings. When an image of the house popped up on her phone, a picture of the small wooden home with its wide porch and lush garden, she couldn't help but smile. Vanessa, noticing her smile, asked, "What's making you smile like that, Jess?" Jessica hesitated for a moment, unsure of how her family would react. But then, with a deep breath, she decided to be honest. "I'm house hunting. I'm planning to buy next month." The room fell silent. Her mother, who had been chatting about something trivial just moments before, suddenly put down her fork, her eyes narrowing. "Buying a house by yourself?" she asked, her voice laced with concern, almost like a command. "You should have talked to us about this first." Jessica's excitement deflated a little as her mother continued, but she remained calm. "Mom, I've been saving for this. It's my money. I didn't borrow from anyone, and I'm not in debt." Vanessa, who was usually the one to voice her opinions the loudest, jumped in. "I'm not saying you shouldn't buy a house, Jess, but have you thought ahead? A house should have space for others, not just for you to live alone forever." The days following that dinner were tense for Jessica. Her family's reaction weighed heavily on her. She couldn't shake the feeling that their plans for her life were always overshadowing her own. But something inside her had shifted. For the first time in a long time, she realized that she had to do what was best for her. This wasn't just about buying a house. It was about claiming her independence and finally stepping into a life she had spent years working toward. Jessica's dream wasn't just a house. It was a life free of the expectations and the quiet sacrifices she had made for everyone else. She knew that if she gave in now, if she let her family's demands dictate her choice, she would be surrendering everything she had worked so hard to build. The reality was clear. She needed to make a bold move, one that would change everything. So Jessica did it. She signed the contract for the house. The decision was final. It wasn't a large, sprawling home. It was perfect for her. Cozy, peaceful, surrounded by nature, and far enough from the noise of the city to give her the tranquility she had always longed for. This situation is something many people face. When you've worked hard for something, and the moment you're about to claim it, someone else tries to take it from you or reshape it to fit their vision. Imagine spending years saving for a vacation, only for a close friend to suggest you change your destination because it would be more fun for them. You've earned that trip, you've earned that time for yourself, but suddenly, someone else's desires start to creep into your plans. This is exactly what Jessica was feeling, and it's something many of us can relate to. Jessica's bold decision to buy the house despite her family's objections marks a significant step in her journey. She could have backed down, given in to the pressure, and settled for a life that wasn't truly hers. But she didn't. She made the decision to live for herself, to take a risk that would ultimately lead her to the life she deserved. Before we continue Jessica's journey, I want to hear from you. How would you feel if you were in Jessica's shoes? Can you relate to the pressure of always being the one who sacrifices for the sake of others? Or maybe, like Jessica, you finally decided to choose yourself and it changed everything. Take a moment to think about it and drop a comment below. Share your thoughts, your feelings, or even your own experience with setting boundaries. This is a story about finding the strength to live for yourself, and I'd love to know how you connect with it. Let's talk about it. Your voice matters here. The moment Jessica shared her news with her family, she knew things would never be the same. Her excitement, which had bubbled up for so long, quickly turned to a feeling of dread. As she sat down for dinner with her parents and sister, a mixture of joy and nervousness washed over her. She had worked so hard for this. This was her moment. She was about to share the news of her dream home. But as soon as she mentioned it, the room fell silent. "Wait, you bought a house?" Vanessa's voice was sharp, her eyebrows furrowed with disbelief. "You mean you already signed everything?" Jessica nodded, trying to keep her voice calm. "Yes, I've been planning for years. It's small, but it's perfect for me." Her mother, who had been quietly enjoying her meal, put down her fork with a deliberate clink. "Sweetheart, I don't think you thought this through. You can't just make such a big decision without consulting us first," she said. Her voice tinged with concern that felt more like a command than advice. "You should have talked to us before signing anything." Jessica's heart sank, but she didn't let it show. "Mom, I've been saving for this. It's my money. I didn't take out a loan, I'm not in debt. I've planned for this moment." But her mother wasn't finished. "But it's a house, Jessica. You can't just live alone in a place like that. Too far. What will you do when you need help? What if you get lonely?" Vanessa, who had remained silent until then, chimed in with her usual sharpness. "Mom's right. You need to think ahead. A house should have room for others, not just for you to live alone forever." Jessica sat there in stunned silence, the weight of her family's words pressing down on her. Vanessa's accusation that she was breaking up the family stung more than she cared to admit. Her mother's sharp disapproval was even harder to bear, especially knowing that her family had never fully understood the quiet sacrifices she had made to reach this point. But as the tension in the room grew thicker, something inside Jessica clicked. 4 years she had lived for others, putting her family's needs first, sacrificing her own happiness to be the dependable, responsible daughter. But that night something changed. She realized that for once, it was time to live for herself. With a calm she didn't know she had, Jessica stood up from the table, pushing her chair back with a soft scrape. She looked around at her family, at her mother who had always controlled the narrative of Jessica's life, at Vanessa who was used to being taken care of, and at her father who had quietly allowed it all to happen. She spoke, her voice firm and steady. "I didn't buy this house for anyone else. I bought it for me," she said, her words cutting through the thick air of unspoken expectations. "And for the first time in my life, I'm choosing what's best for me, not for you. You never asked me what I wanted. You just assumed that I'd give up my dream to help you all." Her mother's face fell, and Vanessa, who had been quietly staring at her phone, finally looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You're tearing us apart over a house?" her mother asked, her voice tinged with hurt. Jessica met her gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. "No, I'm not tearing the family apart. I'm choosing to live my life. I've been living for everyone else for too long, and I can't do it anymore." The first few weeks in her new home felt surreal to Jessica. As she stood on the porch of her small wooden house, she couldn't believe it was really hers. There were no constant demands from her family, no guilt weighing her down. For the first time in years, Jessica felt at peace. The house wasn't large, but it was perfect. Nestled in the woods, with a small garden she could tend to and a quiet that allowed her to truly breathe, this place became her sanctuary, a symbol of everything she had worked so hard to achieve. Every morning, Jessica would wake up early, pour herself a cup of tea, and sit on the porch to watch the sunrise. The sounds of nature filled her ears, birds singing, leaves rustling in the wind, things that she had missed while living in the noise of the city. The world seemed slower here, more deliberate. And in that stillness, Jessica began to rediscover herself. Many of us dream of a place like Jessica's, somewhere we can escape from the pressures of the world, where we can truly relax and recharge. Whether it's a small apartment, a cottage in the countryside, or simply a corner in your home that's just yours, everyone needs a space where they can feel completely at ease. This space is not just about the physical surroundings but the emotional freedom it provides. It's a place where we can let go of the roles others have assigned to us and finally listen to our own hearts. For Jessica, her home wasn't just a physical space. It was a reflection of her new beginning. It was a reminder of her strength and the courage it took to make the hard decision to live for herself. Every evening as she watered the plants in her small garden or sat by the window, she felt herself healing. This wasn't just about the house, it was about her. As the weeks passed in her new home, Jessica began to embrace her independence fully. She felt lighter, freer, and for the first time truly at peace. The weight of her family's expectations was no longer hanging over her, and her days were filled with the simple joys of gardening, reading, and just being. Yet, even as she enjoyed this newfound freedom, she knew the story with her family wasn't over. She still carried the emotional scars of their disapproval, and the questions lingered in her mind. Would they ever understand? Would they respect her decision? One chilly evening, as Jessica was sitting on her porch sipping tea, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Vanessa. The message was short and simple. "I'm looking for a new job. Not asking anything from you, just wanted to say I'm managing on my own now. Thank you for not slamming the door shut." Jessica stared at the screen, her heart tightening. There was no direct apology, no grand gesture of reconciliation, but the message carried something just as important, a recognition that Vanessa was taking responsibility for her life. It was subtle, but it was there. Vanessa, the sister who had once assumed Jessica would always be the one to take care of everything, was starting to change. She was stepping up on her own, taking the initiative, and doing it without asking for help. It wasn't the overt apology Jessica had been waiting for, but it was something even more meaningful. A shift in perspective. Sometimes, change doesn't come in the form of a grand confession or apology. In reality, it often happens quietly, in the small choices people make when they realize they need to be different. It's like when a friend you've supported for years suddenly starts making decisions on their own, without needing your advice or approval. It's not that they don't value you, but they've learned to trust themselves more. That's what happened with Vanessa. She began to realize that she couldn't just depend on Jessica forever, and that was the first step toward growth. As the weeks turned into months, Jessica's new life slowly began to feel like a permanent reality. Her small house, once just a dream, had become the foundation for a new chapter. She was no longer the daughter who always had to shoulder the family's burdens. She was Jessica, the woman who had reclaimed her life and was finally living it on her own terms. Jessica sat by the window one evening, sipping her tea and watching the sunset paint the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. She felt a deep sense of gratitude in that moment. There were still challenges ahead, and her relationship with her family wasn't perfect, but she had learned something invaluable over the past few months. True peace comes from within. She thought back to her earlier days in the city, when the noise of life, the expectations of others, and the constant pull to please everyone had drowned out her own voice. Seemed like a lifetime ago. Now, sitting in her peaceful home, she realized just how far she had come. She had faced the hardest decisions of her life, decisions that tested her strength, her patience, and her love for her family, and yet she had never felt more at peace. Many of us, like Jessica, find ourselves at crossroads where we must choose between living for others or living for ourselves. Maybe it's a career decision, a relationship, or simply the way we spend our time. At some point, we all face that moment when we must decide whether to continue sacrificing our own happiness or to step into the life we truly desire. It's not always an easy choice, but it's always the right one when it leads to our personal growth and peace. Jessica's story isn't just about buying a house. It's about the courage to let go of what no longer serves you, to stand firm in your decisions, and to create a life that reflects your true self. And while there will always be moments of doubt or difficulty, Jessica has learned that her happiness is worth fighting for. Thank you so much for sticking with Jessica's story until the end. It's not an easy journey, but it's one that many of us can relate to. Choosing ourselves, setting boundaries, and finding the strength to live a life that's truly ours. The lesson here is clear. True strength comes not from giving in to others, but from standing firm in your own truth. Sometimes we have to choose our own happiness and peace, even if it means disappointing others. What's your takeaway from this story? How did Jessica's decision resonate with you? I'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new story. Thanks again for being part of this journey. We've got many more stories coming your way.